Our society will suffer terribly if we let things become Wild West. Africa is like a rose. It has thorns, but at the end of the day, the rose grabs
your attention. Welcome to Inside Edge, brought to you by the Lagos Business School Management Hub. Today on the show, we have Dr. Patrick Njoroge. Dr. Njoroge, former governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, brings a wealth of experience from his 20-year tenure at the IMF, where he advised the Deputy Managing Director and served as Deputy Division Chief in the Finance Department. He also held roles as IMF Mission Chief for the Commonwealth of Dominica and economist at Kenya's Ministry of Finance. Dr. Njoroge earned his PhD at Yale and Masters in Economics from the University of Nairobi. His professional interests include macroeconomics, economic policy, international finance, development economics, econometrics, and monetary policy. Welcome, Dr. Njoroge. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you, Ife. Glad to be here.
You're welcome. Today on the show, we will be discussing navigating Africans' financial future. That is strategies for stability, trade, and sustainable innovation. Governor, I recently watched and read about your journey and achievements so far, your speech on the hackathon and the benefits it had provided for Kenya. Also, you were awarded and recognized as the Central Banker of the Year by the African Prestigious Banker magazine. I can't resist asking you a particular question.
Please.
What would you say about the concept of finance for Africans' financial future for someone listening who has no knowledge about finance?
Wow. Thank you, Ife, and glad to be here.
You're welcome.
The concept of finance really is finance helps us in terms of making transactions. So that's really the first benefit, right?
Yeah.
In terms of facilitating underlying transaction of goods.
Yeah, true.
So that is trade. It also helps us a bit in terms of savings. So intratemporal trade. So meaning I save some money now for the future. And so moving it, let's say the purchasing power or wealth from this year to next year when I'm going to spend it. So that is important. But I think there are other elements, and one of which is risk management.
Yeah, very important.
We are faced by a lot of risks, weather, etc., accidents, health, etc. So finance helps us navigate that space as well. So I think it is important to see the wider context of finance rather than just a narrow concept of what do I have in my pocket. So the point though is that finance is not static because those items are not static. The way we trade today will probably not be the way we are going to do. We are going to trade next year or next decade. And also, for instance, the risks that we have or we face today are probably different. So I think the point here is that finance also changes with society.
Sure it does.
And everything around it has to be that malleable, that changeable in a sense. I want to finish by making the point that even as we have all those sort of positives, there's also the wider concern about stability. Whatever we do in the financial sector, we do not want to start, let's say, instability in the economy. And instability happens, for instance, when you have significant inflation or you end up having, let's say, a collapse in a system or an instrument, let's say a bank or one of those things. Those instabilities are very, let's say, hurtful to the economy. Yeah, they really create a lot of
the economy.
Yes, so it is important that even as you see the development in finance, you also watch for emerging risks that would lead to financial stability.
Yeah, thank you so much, Governor. And that brings us to looking at enhancing financial stability, like you talked about. With your vast experience in the Central Bank of Kenya and in the IMF, what should Sub-Saharan African policy makers focus on to ensure financial stability in today's challenging economic environment?
Wow, thank you. I think first on this is to be clear about the risks that are in the economy. So all of us, and I'm talking of policymakers both on the financial sector or for that matter even in the fiscal, all policymakers, we need to be more attuned to the risks that faces.
True.
And as I said at the beginning, or in the first question, answering your first question, the developments that take place in our economy will create new risks, and we need to be clear about those risks and be ready to deal with them.
Yes.
So that is the first thing we need to do. Secondly, the risks that may come from outside, meaning from other parts of the world, even.
Yes.
Yeah. So you could think, unfortunately, that you are an island, and an economy is an island to itself, and that would be a big mistake.
Big problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what happens in a neighboring country, or for that matter, what happens in a particular different part of the world, can very quickly lead to significant or be a tsunami in your space, and so you have to deal with that. Thirdly, we need to be clear how to resolve those issues. I'll probably say the policymakers need to have solutions for each one of these risks, right? So, including even bank failure. Yeah, how do you resolve a bank when it collapses, so as to minimize the cost, and for that matter also to be clear who is going to bear the cost or the burden of these things. So there are standard, let's say, what you may call, best practices in a lot of these things. And I think that is what I would strongly encourage policymakers to do, to adopt best practices in each one of these areas. And it's easy to just say, okay, adopt best practices, but it may involve changing laws, tightening some of the requirements like capital requirements, etc. But I think that is the journey we are on. But I think we need to have, for the benefit of our people, we need to have a strong financial system, one that is not, let's say, susceptible to shocks, because we'll be, we're in a very dangerous environment where we'll be getting shocks routinely, and some of them will be huge, and they may, if we are not careful, could capsize an economy.
Yes, and something flexible.
Exactly.
Yes. Thank you so much on that, Governor. We actually stumbled on a video which actually showed Kenya doing exactly what you said. That's why Kenya is really strong in the economic space. That's beautiful. Now, looking at regional trade integration, it's often easier for Nigerian entrepreneurs to export to Western countries other than African nations. Where do you think regional trade integration has fallen short? And what can be done to improve intra-African commerce?
Okay. I think right off the bat, the arrangements that we have today are partly due to our historical arrangements that we have had. I'm talking of this sort of orientation to the global north. Yeah, we do understand how those that colonized us created links with their capitals.
Yes.
So in some sense, those trade patterns have been well established, right? And they were established so as to extract some of the materials, etc. And that's why most of us, I'm talking now of Africa, a lot of the countries are exporting sort of primary commodities,
True.
right? Not finished products or processed products, etc. So about, I think it is the number that I recall is something in the order of 85% of our trade, African trade, is with the global north or outside Africa.
Outside Africa.
Yeah. So African trade is like 15%, yeah, of our trade. So you can see your point is valid that so what we do about that, I think there are many things that continue. I mean, so your question is, why are we still at 15%?
Yes.
I mean, 50 years after independence, 50 plus years after independence, why are we still here? And I think there are many things. First is that we don't have, let's say, the products that we need. They are not available in the neighboring countries. So in terms of, let's say, connecting the supply chains, they are not part of that supply chain. And some of the products that we need are finished products, and it's easier to import them from China or wherever else it is. So that is one thing. So we need to do better in exporting to our neighbors the things that they want, right? So some of them could be manufactured goods, etc. But it's important to have that, to build that. And as a matter of fact, there has been a new, as you know, new agreement, the African Continental Free Trade Area. And that agreement really postulates that is actually what will happen going forward. There'll be more intra-regional trade and supporting that. Now,
Supporting of African nations.
Exactly. So, but there's something else that I need to say. There's a lot of excitement about removing some of the trade barriers. And some of the barriers involve, for instance, the payment system. Yeah, so in effect, improving the payment system would facilitate that, but that's not the only one. There are tariff barriers as well, meaning we do have a lot of tariffs that need to be lowered between us, between the various countries. There are also other things, sort of border crossings and, need to be facilitated, etc. So there are many non-trade barriers that are there that need to be removed. But a point I made recently is that a lot of our trade, as we contemplate it, is goods trade, merchandise goods. The point is that whatever we are doing, that will facilitate the growth of let's say, manufacturing sectors in the various nations. My point was that we need to accelerate trade in services. Trade in services is so very important. Why? Because that's the only way we can create the number of jobs we need to create between now and 2050. The population, African population, is going to balloon during that period. And, by 2050, about 25% of workers, global workers, will be in Africa. So we need to create jobs for them. Today, Africa creates something like 3.7 million jobs a year. And we need something like more than 10 to 15 million jobs a year. So the only way we can do that is not with manufacturing, but actually with services. So that means that we need to accelerate services trade. And there are many things that we can do there. But I think the point is that's something that we as policymakers have to accept. And there are all these nuisance things like visas and all those other things. All those things need to be facilitated. And open skies, travel. It's so difficult to travel from one corner of the country to another. And I think those sort of barriers need to be lowered
for easy access and easy trade.
Exactly.
True. Thank you so much. That was a very beautiful insight. I like that. Now, before we dive into fostering fintech innovation, I happened to stumble on one of your videos where you talked about Web 3.0 and how it had actually benefited Kenya on the long run, which is bringing us closer to the objective of financial services. Now, in the era of fintech, what policies should the Nigerian government implement to support current market players and attract new investors? And what emerging areas of fintech innovation do you think will shape Africa's financial future?
Wow, that's a complicated question. And I think what I would say for Nigeria applies for any country in the world.
Okay.
Meaning all countries, we are at different points, sort of development in that space that you mentioned. But I think all of them, the approach should be the same, which is, yes, there will be these innovations that will come. And to understand that the innovations can be beneficial. But innovations also carry risks. And the policymakers have to be really concerned about those risks and be aware of them and be ready to deal with the risks if they emerge, if they actually get crystallized, or for that matter, in the context of making sure that they don't emerge.
Yes.
So I think that's the first thing I would say. Now, the sort of things that are put forward in terms of current innovations, some of them also have been in place in other jurisdictions. So let's put it this way: Nigeria is no different from any other country, and the innovators that are here are, they are quote unquote, they are brothers and sisters in other jurisdictions are probably putting forward the same, similar products, etc.
Yes.
Particularly in the space of payments, where I think others are much further ahead. I made the point before that in the last 8 years when I've been governor, I've probably gone to a commercial bank maybe actually once only after I left. So
Once?
in 8 years I never did.
In 8 years, just
Never.
once?
Yep. I don't need to, because all my transactions are on the phone.
On the phone.
Yeah.
I remember you talked about M-Pesa.
Exactly.
Yes.
So and other products like that. So I'm making the point that we are further ahead in that payment space because there has been a lot of other innovations that have supported it. If you need to make payments or electricity payments or whatever else, pay school fees, etc., you can do all that by phone.
By phone.
Yeah. And it's secure. Everybody does that.
Yes.
So cash is no longer that important in that sense. So making the point that those nations that or those jurisdictions that are not there yet, they can actually look at the leaders in that space or in those products, how they are being, let's say, regulated to minimize the risks, etc., and learn from them. Yeah. Now, there are others that you can say that we haven't had, and they can be regulated according to what I call international best practices.
Yes.
So figure out what the best practices are and learn with that. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, there are others where there hasn't been sort of nothing has emerged that you can say is the best practices. Yeah, in terms of regulating. And there is where I think you need to work with other regulators. Yeah. There's a proverb that says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go with somebody. Go together.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, this is something that we have a good sense of because I just want to say that we are the marathon runners of the world, so let's put it out there.
Let's put it out there.
Yeah. So if you're going long distance, you generally go with somebody else.
True.
And then you can help each other along the way. There's a lot of teamwork.
And lessons learned from both angles.
So that is one thing I would say, that there are some things that maybe you can work with others to. So for instance, now there's a lot of discussion about crypto space, how to regulate that. Now there has been a lot of agreement, let's say, among regulators that, it's not really a payment thing, which is what years ago, it feels like, it is like 3 centuries ago, but it was only like, a couple of years ago. They were calling, Bitcoin and all that is going to revolutionize payments. Yeah. No, actually, it's just an asset class. It's another asset class. And now we've agreed that is what it is.
That is what it is.
We've also agreed that there are some specific risks, like, for instance, money laundering, this illicit transaction that it may facilitate. So we need to deal with it so that doesn't happen. Yeah. Unfortunately, it appears that sort of problem is
inevitable.
Well, yeah, but I think I was going to say, in some of these things, it appears that it is not a bug. It's what it is meant to be, So it's a feature, and I think that's why the rub is in terms of the fight between the policymakers and the innovators or the promoters of these things.
Okay.
So anyway, so that's really how I would explain. I mean, at the end of the day, society will suffer terribly if we let things become Wild West.
Sure.
Yeah, just anybody comes in and does whatever they want, with the best quote-unquote intentions. Half the time you never know what the intentions are, as we all know. Yeah, and half the time you don't even know how things will evolve. So it is important to be very cautious at the beginning. And here my hat's off to all those regulators that have kind of asked the question and said, wait, this is not something we want to rush.
Yes.
Yeah, let's look at it carefully and understand where the risks are, and then figure out what is the best way to
come back to this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Governor. We've come to the end of our episode, and it's game time. I hope you play games and you like playing games.
Some games, yes, some games.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm very curious to know, because all your life you've had a long history around economics or finance. If not economist, what else would you be doing?
If I wasn't an economist, man, wow. I can assure you that I won't be in music. No, I have zero talent in music.
Okay.
No, I think maybe I'm more into science, so I'll do engineering.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's really what I would have done. And frankly, when I started off, I thought I was going to be an engineer, electronic engineer to be precise.
Whoa.
But somewhere along the line, I decided to be an economist. So I think if that switch hadn't happened, I would be an electrical engineer or electronic engineer. I don't know what they do nowadays, but whatever it is, I would have been one of them. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Governor. Would you like to address any business key points for our parting thoughts?
I think basically the point I would make is that this is the first time I've been in Nigeria. Wow. And I've learned a lot in the 5 days I've been here.
That's impressive.
I mean, it's amazing the potential that Nigeria has. It's huge. And Nigeria is, you could think of Nigeria as the sort of the firstborn of one of the older siblings in Africa. Yeah? Ghana will obviously insist that they're
actually first brothers.
The firstborn, Yes. So we don't want to get into that, or even for that matter, whose jollof is better.
Jollof rice.
I don't want to get into that, but I think we understand that if Nigeria does well, Ghana as well, Kenya as well. I mean,
It's going to be
Africa will
power.
boom.
Yes.
And if we are going to get those jobs that I mentioned, those economies have to do well.
Yes.
So the responsibility of being an older brother or sister is huge. And that's what I see. I went to yesterday, had the honor of visiting the new refinery.
Yes.
And I was blown away. Not just the size of it, etc., but really the sense of, we can do something. This is Africa.
Yes.
Yeah. You hear a lot of negative stories. Yeah, negative stories. And there are things that, sure, there are millions of things to hold you back. There's a sort of a crabs in a barrel syndrome. You know what a crabs in a barrel syndrome is?
Crabs in a barrel.
Yeah, put crabs in a sufuria, I don't know, in a container.
And they all pull each other.
Exactly. The one that tries to get out, is pulled back.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
So that's a crabs in a barrel syndrome.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us see that every day. And that is really disgusting. And we have to get out of that by looking at the positive things and really building on those positive energies. Yeah.
True.
As I explained before, Africa, in my mind, is like a rose. We've all seen a rose, right?
Yeah.
Really pretty.
Pretty.
Right? But it has thorns.
Yes.
So yeah, it has thorns. But at the end of the day, the rose grabs you.
Grabs your attention. True.
That's Africa.
Thank you so much, Governor. Thank you so much for joining us at the Management Hub. This episode was spectacular and very insightful. We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you.